Hello, beautiful people,
Hi.
hello, composers, hello, music lovers. Today, we're going to discuss my quote unquote Opus Juan title Umbrales Inversos or Inverse Thresholds, and it kind of refers to the form. It's in variation form, but what and also reflects what I will go on to develop, like my concern with my formal concerns. Like one variation is going forward while another is going backwards. It's going to be reflected in the Roman numerals, and I'm gonna play it now, and I think we
What's the
can.
year on the piece? It's 2009 or 10?
From 2009, yeah,
Okay.
I believe so.
All right.
I should put it here to 2009. Yes, it's from 2009. So this was me 16 years ago. I think it was more likely 2008, 2009, something like that. Yeah,
Okay.
like began on 2008, finished on 2009, possibly. So let's do this, and you can guys comment on this. What? Oh, wait a second. My bad. Yes, yes, yes. What a way to begin. Now we should. It should be fine now. Okay. And that will be it. And I guess, what can I say about this? It's a piece that's in between of what will come after, uh, that and what was the influence beforehand. The influence beforehand could be seen in more academic type of languages, especially the harmonic languages towards the first half of the piece that I describe as expressionist, whereas towards the end it kind of turns more, a bit more playful, you might say. It experiments more with, or not experiments, it lets itself be more rhythmically interesting, uh, with kind of like something that was seen since the beginning too, like the repeated note motifs. But I think that overall comes across a bit too serious and, mm, not so much having its own voice. You can hear its own voice here and there, but not throughout the whole of the piece. It doesn't permeate the piece as a whole. But I will say that, um, yeah, it is an Opus 1 for me because it's the first one where I can say that I was searching for that personal, intrinsic voice that
Mhm.
we all are looking for, artistic voice, that artistic merit, you might say. I wasn't, even if I was influenced by different types of composers, you may listen to uh, like the second Viennese school influence, Bartok influence, Ligeti influence, especially with uh, the musical ricercata. There are some sections that sound like the musical ricercata piece where um, with the whole tone or neighbor
Mhm.
note, I might say. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, you can also listen. It's like an in between between the influences, all of those influences that I had. That in the end, they are very academic. They are what you study in set theory classes.
Mhm.
It's kind of like, but kind of like trying to get out of that mold and be something of its own. Um, and yeah, it's like that's what I
We were
can.
all so serious when we were younger.
What
So we were all so serious when we were younger.
I think so. Yeah, I think that even the first pieces in Buffalo were less serious than this. It's like the tone,
Mhm.
the overall tone is kind of like very, um, very funebre, you might say,
Yeah.
very kind of like dead serious, very macabre, even at some places. But
So
and the counterpoint too, you might say, but the counterpoint, there's always been some type of counterpoint that I've always liked using. I love counterpoint, but that this type of counterpoint, I think that it points towards the more academic type of stuff, whereas the repeated notes or the neighbor notes kind of points towards more what I was looking on doing, like more towards a newer sound, even though a repeated note motive, it's been done over and over, but it's kind of like how you use it. It
Mhm.
depends on the durations, on rhythms. Like it. I was too worried, I will say, with harmony, and I will say that it kind of like in the background, some rhythmical interest started appearing, you might say, and that
yeah,
will come across
I,
more with
I wanted
repeated
to ask you
stuff.
about like the rhythm and how you were thinking about rhythm here versus now, and also, I mean, also I don't know like how you um like envision the rhythm being performed because I feel like the performer here she played it very musically, but she didn't always play it 100% rhythmically accurate as you notated. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and I don't know. I yeah. So I'm wondering, yeah, what you're trying to capture because some of the times, like it almost it looks. I mean, you have a lot of meter changes, and it seems. It almost seems like, and the way she plays it, it seems like you're just going for a kind of more organic or like nature like um rhythm structure, but
the way she
like
played, you say.
yeah, I don't know if that's what you intended or not.
I think that I kind of trusted the performer. Her name is Helen Rombola, and we work together on the performance, and I like so many
Mhm.
times, like when a performer plays something a certain way, it sounds better than the way it is written, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, let's go with that. Let's just what you did, or
Yeah. No,
for
I think
example,
what she played sounded great. Like she was very mute, but yeah, it just struck me as different that if you're just like glancing at the score, it looks very, I guess, mechanical and just from
yes,
a rhythmic standpoint, and it
right. For
doesn't sound
example,
that way.
it will something like this. It will, I think, it kind of looks that way, but she added some intensity to this part in particular, kind of
Mm-hmm.
like desperation. And I think that I was looking for that in a way, like more emotional type of thinking, of playing, of portraying the music in a way. I really like that, and probably the performer in a way influenced me, uh, and
Mm-hmm.
make me think like, well, that's one of the times that where you realize that, as we learn in school, or as it was repeated to us, that the score is a fiction. The music itself, where does it happen? In the music hall, in the music,
Mm-hmm.
in the performance itself. And what I had written there is just a map. Is how the performer interprets it, and kind
Yeah.
of projects it to the public, what really matters. And I think that, for example, something that this on paper, it looks really boring to me right now, but if
Mm-hmm.
we go back and listen to it, like she made it exciting. She made it like this was kind of desperate. She gave it a feeling of desperation that wasn't in the page, but she saw it there and she projected it that way. So I
Yeah, I wonder though, like, I mean, maybe even just knowing your current work now, if like, especially because you don't seem to be very like you have a lot of like usually complicated meter stuff, and you don't seem very attached to like the absolute precision of it. I wonder if um the music is notated in a way that is makes it look difficult and maybe what your intention is, and if that, I mean, she was a mentor's player that probably was able just to grab it, but I wonder if other players,
will
if
get intimidated.
yeah, intimidated, and if there's, I don't know what it would be, but I wonder if there's a solution to get um the same result from a different type of player, maybe one with not as strong of a contemporary music background, with different type of notation.
Now that you mention notation, I think that the notation here, even though it seems kind of complex in places, I don't think that it's that mature. When I look
Uh-huh.
at this, I think, well, I think that we can all say this about our own selves, like 15, 16 years ago, let's say. But when I wouldn't notate the things that are here the same way, probably. I will think more. I will say that I was thinking more like a composer here, instead of putting myself in the place of the performer, which is what
Mhm.
I usually tend to do now, or try to do
Mhm.
nowadays, or have tried to do after this piece. It's like it's been a progression. It's like even if
Yeah.
it's not in the good way or in the right direction, I've come a long way, you might say, in the notation.
Yeah. Sometimes
Also,
I just find that I mean I think you have stronger rhythmic ideas than I have, but I used to have very complicated rhythms, and
mm-hmm.
I realized that when players approximated them, I didn't mind so much. So I started making my rhythmic notations less complicated, and um, that seemed to get better results on a whole. Like that what I more like what I wanted. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like I think you're like I know there's some people like Brian for anyhow. Like he really, I mean, his rhythmic rotations are way be like way more complex than in this piece, but supposedly he, from everyone I know who's worked with him, he really, really feels these rhythms, that these really crazy polyrhythms that he writes, he feels those very strongly and wants crazy, like a lot of accuracy.
But
Um,
uh, I will say that I've always looked for approximations.
yeah,
Especially since studying in grad school, like it was more about the gesture, about capturing a sonic image.
yeah. I mean, I
About
wonder even if writing the word like rubato or something simple like that would um, make players feel just more invited to do so. I don't know.
yeah, I think so too. I used I After this piece, I started using more and more adjectives to describe the music, to describe the atmosphere,
Yeah,
because I think that okay, it is complicated music. It's how I think. It's like I'm not gonna apologize for thinking
no,
music
you.
in a complex way
Oh
or
no,
anything.
I don't think you should change the music. It's just how do you communicate that the
But
best
at the
way
same time, it's
possible.
like I'm not so anal, you might say, or pedant or whatever. Like if performers make a
Mm-hmm.
mistake, I see the mistake as part of the performance, as part of the interpretation. Like when you are reading a poem or interpreting literature, like everybody's gonna have a different interpretation, and that's the good thing about art itself. And that some composers really, I would say, especially younger composers kind of struggle with. They want everything played like their finale notation. Well, finale is
Oh,
dead now, but like a
no,
mini play.
Eureka.
Yeah, Dorico, like a Dorico player will play it like on the exact beat,
Yeah,
and it kind of takes away the human element,
yeah,
the
yeah. It's
artistic,
uppercrutch.
which at the same time is the artistic element, because throughout all of art, that's the beauty of it. Like
Mm-hmm.
what, like the different interpretations. What's a classic? How does a classic remain a classic and remain relevant uh throughout the year, through hundreds or millennia? Like it's because of different interpretations that people give through different periods, right? And the same should
Yeah,
be said about composition, I think.
yeah. I wish my student composers, I tell them, especially the more advanced ones, I tell them to please turn off MIDI on your computer because I think it is so unhelpful, and it's hard to just envision, yeah, actual interpreters interpreting your music, and yeah, how little like I mean, I remember very clearly from my undergraduate, I took a seminar and we had some professional performers one day, and for whatever we had the same piece printed out, just like a regular sheet of music, and then the other the same piece printed out a separate time horizontally. Um, and even that minor change of just like the paper orientation changed their interpretation significantly, which was I don't know, it's interesting that every little thing makes a. I mean, obviously we're not in control of the interpretation, but like things we do affect affect it because they're reacting to. I mean, essentially, as composers, we make fancy paper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But it does, if it doesn't get played, it there's no interpretation, then it's dead paper. It's just
Uh-huh.
beautiful signs. And also something that I wanted to say that Shanting mentioned last time. Shanting, do you wanna chime in on the
Yeah.
conversation?
Yeah, maybe you can tell everybody now because I don't really remember what I said last time.
Well, it was about the register that either I was on the
Oh
middle
yeah.
of the keyboard or I was at the extremes of the keyboard. And I kind of like felt it more this time around. And it was very intentional to have these extremes, not to go like all the way up or the way down. If you see, only at the beginning it will be when I'm kind of like on the bass register with both hands, and towards the end probably I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. So uh how this, but I think that the intention in a way, like this is mid to bass register, right? But it quickly goes up, and then I will say towards the end it's like both are on the mid to bass register, really close together.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it was intentional. It was like I was visualizing. I was, well, I couldn't say that I was visualizing the performer that much because I do that now more, and I would do it afterwards plenty more. But there was something of that, where I could like at least listen to the, yeah, visualize the performer going in the middle and then kind of like towards the extremes, but not exploring everything. Like you said, that it could have benefited this piece more and created more contrast between the variations, you might say. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember my comments on the use of registers. Yeah, I didn't know that you had such a plan for that.
So it was like, it wasn't a focus of it, but I, after you mention it and now listening to it, I kind of like remember that I had it at some level of consciousness, but it was something that I will go on to develop. It was something that showed up here, like only in extremes, opposites, and in the middle register. Extreme opposite and in the middle register. And for a piece this long, it lasts like 11 minutes, 11:30, something like that. I think it gets boring pretty fast, and then I will then go on and work more with register, and that implies timbre too.
Yeah. I mean, at the
So
same time, I do think, especially being an Opus One, there is like a maturity in the fact that it is like more focused in that way.
well, you could say that. Um,
I mean, I think, yeah, I think it would be cool to explore registers, especially from now, where you probably would do it in a way, in a thoughtful way. But you know,
is that
when we were younger, it's harder.
I think that I fell into the trap that a lot of young composers fell. I wanted to address too many problems within a single composition, within a single movement, right? And
Mhm.
didn't focus that much on one aspect or two aspects. It was, I feel like sometimes it loses focus,
Mm.
and it seems that way in the directionality. Sometimes it sometimes shows a clear directionality. It's sometimes very teleological. Remember that word from the seminar days. And sometimes it isn't that teleological. It's not so goal oriented at other times. And but there lies the charm, I will say, at the same time. It's like a kid, like with a lot of different flavors of candy and eating all of these flavors of candy and kind of deciding putting them trying to organize them. And after a couple of tries the years prior, like he could at least form make something with a discernible form out of it, even if it's not the most tasteful form. I will say it's something that has an intentionality, at least an intent of having intentionality, and that's where
Hmm.
I would say the charm is. I wouldn't mind if this piece gets played as is again. I would like last time Sean Ting asked me that, and I said that I wouldn't like it to be played. But then again, I thought about it, and now that I listen to it, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't be so proud, let's say, but it's it's like it reflects a specific point in time in the development of the
Hmm.
artist, of where one wants to go. And yeah, I
I
think
don't
it
know. Sometimes pieces have become special not because I don't know, not because they're like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever written, but because of like what it meant for you as a composer, you know?
yeah, I think this will be the first one that it's a milestone in terms of form. I could learn a way to build a piece with a longer form. Before this, it was either really simple forms, or through compose or short pieces.
Hmm.
So in a way, even if it's not the most cohesive work, in those terms, that formal concerns of how music flows through time, like even if I will say that there's too much material, I will say at the same time that it's the first time that I could accomplish longer form in and kind of give it some coherence here or there.
Yeah. What was the what was the piece you wrote after
This
this one?
After this one, it was the string quartet, and that was a lot more focused. The harmonic
That
language
was that was for the Jack reading.
for the Jack
Like
reading.
Papa, yeah, the infamous one. Um,
Infamous, infamous reading. Yeah,
yeah,
but
it
I
was.
think that piece kind of turned out okay. It was a different harmonic language. I had more.
Did you have a good recording out? Did you get a recording of the piece ever or no?
I don't have a full recording. I have excerpts of the
Oh,
recording,
okay.
and I kind of pieced it together and
I'm just
can.
curious, like what from this piece like became explored in the next one.
Well,
Or,
you might say these types of Hocket rhythms will have gotten more explored. Uh, the layering towards the end definitely got more explored. That this I made it more of my part of my language, like the layering, different layers of tuplets, of septuplets, sextuplets, etc. Uh, so that you can get a statistical hearing, you might say, an interweaving of lines that kind of like weave together, and you get this texture, this very specific texture that may in a way be described as Ligetian, but I think that I didn't use them that well as Ligeti, and so because I didn't use them as well as Ligeti, they sound my own. Let's put it that way, right? Ligeti was a master of layering. I wasn't, but I was trying to incorporate it into my language. Uh, Counterpoint persisted, but not to such a degree. Let me see what else I will say that the repeated notes kind of like okay, the Hocketing rhythms here, of course, it persisted, especially between instruments, like how they how the dialogue went between one and another instrument. I was more conscious of that. The register, extreme registers, is like now I would be more conscious of the registers. Sometimes I would like all of them to go up. Sometimes, well,
Mhm.
most of the time I will have that quartet go up or the middle register, not towards the bass because of the
Mhm.
limitation of the violins and stuff like that. Uh, uh, the staccato gestures, more playful, not so legato gestures. Like I will say that it went into that um, the repeated notes
Do
that
you
kind
write
of
your piano music? Do you write your piano music on a piano?
yeah, yes.
You write all your music on a piano, or just your piano music?
Most of the music will write at the piano. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Okay.
sometimes it will be out of my head, but most of the time I will say at the piano. Like pitch is kind of an important factor, uh, not the main one. I will say that pitch is more important for Shanting than for me. I
Mhm.
don't know what you guys will say. I will say that, for example, rhythm is more important for me than for Shanting, and register.
That's more important for me.
Uh, huh? What?
And probably neither are that important for me.
Yeah, I don't
Mm.
think that for you. You're out of this conversation. What would you say, Shanti? Because you've always described yourself as having, uh,
Because I think this music, I mean, this music reads very pianistic, I think, too. Yeah.
rhythmatically. Yeah, I think I write a lot at the piano.
Which
And
I mean, it's great because it is for the piano, but I wonder, yeah, if does it, how does the instrument, like writing for the piano, how does it change?
how does it change?
Because
Uh,
I'm someone who, if I was to write for the piano, I would write on the piano, but if I write not for the piano, I typically don't
with
write on the
with
piano.
time, I've kind of like have gotten farther away from the piano. I will say I write at the piano, but use reference pitches or use the piano just to get the durations in my head and stuff like that.
Yeah.
When it's not for the keyboard, when it's for the keyboard, then I wanna
Oh,
make
for
sure
sure.
that
I mean,
it's
and some people are able to do it really well, right at the piano, and not have everything sound pianistic if it's not written for the piano. Um, I just, my very first composition teacher was very much like, if you're writing for like the violin, don't write at the piano, because he didn't want me to write something pianistic. And it just kind of got really ingrained, and that's how I just always have worked. I've always, if I'm writing a piano piece, though, I will sit on my piano and write it for sure.
yeah, but still I don't have perfect pitch, so I need some
No,
reference pitches and kind of like okay the contour of the line of the melodic line or something like that, like or the register kind of like make sure or the
I mean, with that
harmony.
being said, a lot of times when I'm teaching and I get student scores, I most often will play them on the piano. I'll
Yeah,
realize the score, or at least some of the harmonies. I do that
yeah, but at the
as
same
an
time
interpreter.
I cannot say that I depend 100% because if I wrote for more instruments or for other instruments, it's like it's not. you cannot necessarily make a piano reduction, or I am not thinking about like,
Yeah,
okay, I'm
no, for
gonna
sure.
write the piano and then distribute the instrument, distribute it amongst the instruments. But yeah, I wanted
Yeah.
to ask something. What do you think? Is this very pitchy?
You mean your
This pitch,
pieces in general, or
This
this
this one
piece.
particular piece?
and the later one, in comparison with the later ones, and in comparison with your music, like you, it seems like for you, pitch has become a concern.
I mean,
One of
it's also hard to write for the piano and not be pitchy.
I mean, I mean, for me, it really depends on the instrumentation. I think and also it depends on what my concepts are for that, or for those particular projects. In general, I think I'm pretty concerned about the pitch, because I see it as a way to help define an element. Just say, if you think that, let's say, if we since you said that your next project after this piano is a string quartet, right? For
Mhm.
example, if you want to make a scratchy tone an element of your piece, then there must be a way to help ourselves or help the listener to differentiate various types of like scratchy tone. Like, for example, the level of scratchiness, but also the most obvious way is to alter the pitches of each appearance of the scratchy tones. So for me, I would say I'm pretty concerned about pitch, in the sense that I'm not trying to be extremely. I mean, I'm not a very careful person who organize all the pitches and harmonies very strictly, but I'm very concerned about whether I choose the correct pitches for a certain like sonic event in my piece. So I would say I'm pretty. I'm. I won't say I'm like pitch oriented or like a very pitch based composer, but I'm definitely aware of the importance of pitches in my piece, and I think I mean, at least in to my ears, I will be a little bit unhappy if the the pitches I use are different from what I think. Then I will be um mm, not quite satisfied. But I mean, like what Megan said, writing for the piano is hard not to be pitchy unless you try to give up these elements completely for whatever reason and for whatever way. Because whenever you try to hit the keys, even if you don't plan to I mean, even if you try to write, like, let's say, in a like a graphical notation, and you even if you don't try to specify what pitches that the pianist will play, the listener will end up hearing a bunch of pitches. Even if you just try to grease over the keys, you will hear some like white keys if you just grease normally. And then what if you just grease some black keys? Then you will get some pentatonic scales, right? So it's even if you just want to like do some inside piano tricks, um, most of the time you will hear some pitches coming out, even if maybe the sound will be of
Mhm.
more noise, right? So
Mhm.
I think it's totally normal and pretty inevitable to be pitchy for piano compositions. It is just a matter how much pitch is important to the project. For example, I think for example, if your piece or your future project for the piano requires a little bit more like abstract thinking, then maybe you think more about the contour, more think more about the texture. Maybe somehow you will have less focus on the pitch. But unfortunately, maybe you will still need to sound or
Did you?
but again, if I respond to your question, I think for if I look back into my repertoire, my portfolio, I would say
Hmm.
it really depends on the project. I think for some projects, I'm very noise based. For some projects, I'm very pitchy. Yeah, I'm not a very careful person though when about what kind of pitches should be used or intervals should be used. I'm I think I'm not
Well,
very rigorous.
I think that
more intuitive. I think you have a strong. You have. I think you have a. Might you have a strong sense of what sounds you want intuitively.
exactly. And what sonorities do you wanna use? I will say, like you have
Yeah.
one internalizes what sounds, what sonorities one prefers, but it seems like you kind of like are able to switch those preferences depending on the context, in regards to pitch particularly, which is pretty good, I think, without having systematize it in a way like set theory or stuff like that, because I we've talked before, and you don't really use set theory for organizing your harmony or anything like that, right? For this piece, I think that if I remember correctly, a lot of that set theory and sets and set types and set classes were used. But in the end, I will say that it can be a trap because you tend to prefer some over others and kind of like tend to have a very flat harmony in a way sometimes. So a way to correct that might be counterpoint or contour, having those melodic lines be closer together, having a uh, more dense texture or register. And that's what I found out when trying to use set theory for some of the pieces. Like it didn't quite serve my purposes artistically or compositionally speaking, whereas all these other parameters or dimensions did, I would say.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, there's a lot to think about pitch, and it's pretty interesting that you mentioned that, because with the string quartet, what Megan asked me what remained, but what changed is that I started incorporating a lot of extended techniques too, and try to make them part of the discourse, not just in a surface level manner, like for color, but trying to so that each sound that yielded out of an extended technique was part of the material itself that got developed throughout the piece, and that began with Opus 2, I will say, with the string quartet in a way. But yeah, it's like I think that Megan has spoken about going inside the piano many times. I think that you are the ones that have more experience with being inside the piano, but at the same time, I don't get excited for that. For when I think
Well,
of
I
writing,
think the reason why I think the inside the piano doesn't seem to fit your language is because it's not, for the most part, most of the techniques inside the piano are rather slow. And so you can't get very complicated or precise rhythms,
yeah,
or a lot of speed oftentimes inside the piano, um, as you can on the keys.
But maybe you can get some accessories to help you. Maybe you get a mallet and then hit the strings. Maybe.
Yeah,
yeah. But
maybe.
I have
Yeah.
never
Get a
been
percussionist.
interested. Probably if there's another piece, but I don't know. I've never seen the piano for. I admire pieces that use them effectively, but in my own composition,
Oh,
I'm kind of like pretty conventional when speaking about
I
that.
feel like maybe you could, maybe if you wanted to do more inside the piano stuff, it would work better for you to have two pianists, one like on the keys and one inside the piano,
Yes,
because you could get a little bit um, more, I guess, like complexity, um, more layers.
that would be. I haven't thought about that, but it's that I haven't given uh, much thought or deep thought into the extended piano. I admire some
Yeah,
pieces like
I
cases
mean, I think
with
I started getting into it when I was an undergraduate. Del Niente, we were talking before, was in his infancy, and one of the original founders of Del Niente, she was very, very much into bowed piano.
Mm-hmm.
And which is a very, it's a sound that normally, it's very, it's like basically you take either horsehair or fishing line and you weave it through and you have to go up and down. So it takes two hands and it's very, for
Seeing
one
pictures
pitch,
of
it's
you
very slow.
doing, yeah.
Um, and a lot of times she would need a lot of people to play. And so a couple times I'd play inside the piano, like very simple inside the piano stuff with for Del Niente, with a legitimate pianist on the keys. I was like an assistant. But I was young at the time. Like I was 18, 19 probably doing that. And so I kind of and I was brand new to contemporary music, so that got I think maybe got infiltrated into my sound world because it was a early new music experience for me.
What about you, Shanting? Have you ever thought of going inside the piano?
Time. The time.
Huh?
All the time.
All the time?
All. Yeah. Really
And
want to
when?
do that.
Have you written for the Inside the Piano? I haven't heard any pieces
Yeah,
like that from you, I
But
don't think.
I only use it like very scarcely. I only like the most extreme that I used was not very extreme, like brushing the bass string or muting the string while playing on the key. So I just want when I never realized any kind of fantasy. Yeah, partially
Yeah.
because I applied for opportunities in Hong Kong, and unfortunately, people, especially for pianists or for the use of piano in Hong Kong, usually they have a lot of restriction. They would be pretty concerned even
why?
if you try to mute the string.
Why?
I'm not
Hmm.
joking, but they're very concerned about whether you will damage their
I mean,
expensive Steinway.
I can see that. I mean, honestly, I've attached a dancer to a piano, um, and I very often, every time I had that performed, I had to. No, I think the only reason it went through was because I literally had like the most high level like engineering technical drawings of everything that was happening and how little force or pressure or wear that it put on the actual piano itself, because visually it looks like that might not be the case if you're not if you don't really know the the physical nature of this of the instrument. And I feel like a lot of musicians don't really understand physically how their instruments work so much, so they get I mean, and obviously there are pieces out there that don't like, you know, if you think of like the Cage prepared piano stuff. Well, some of the stuff Cage does is damaging to the piano. But that doesn't mean that everything is either.
I remember one time, not for my piece, but another colleague in Hong Kong, as well as in Hong Kong, and he had some inside piano techniques. To my eyes, though, those techniques are not very like not anything outrageous, but the stage manager came up to us and asked if we could choose not to use those techniques, or why we use those techniques, something like that. I forgot the exact questions, because I was not the one who had to deal with that, but yeah, it's happened. So at least somehow these kind of memories stay in my head, and I am very aware of the possibilities of like being scrutinized if I use inside piano techniques.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty open to it, to be honest. As I said, like all the time, I want to do it. I just want to realize all
It's
the
just having an
fantasies.
opportunity, yeah.
But I
That was one thing that was amazing about University of Buffalo, is that we were really not restricted piano wise, because there was so many pianos at various states like that. They were really open to, there was a piano there for everybody. Like there was enough, there was pianos that you could do any kind of preparation to, and there was no qualms, you know, which is not always the case. Like they actually, I remember Eric Hubner actually performed all of the Cage sonata interludes, which is
That
unusual for a university to actually have the resources to sponsor something like that.
That's very true, actually.
for me it would be
Mhm.
that it might work for a slow section if the sound is pretty homogeneous, you might say,
Or ensemble.
but not for the whole.
Actually, find the thing that draws me to the inside the piano stuff the most is actually um, when the piano is in an ensemble,
Mhm.
because the piano really doesn't blend with any instrument. It just doesn't have a similar, like, it doesn't have any kind of homogeneous sound to any other instrument. It just sounds completely different. It can't, you know, really sustain notes. It's very high on transient, and so like I think sometimes I'm more drawn to extended techniques on the piano in ensembles.
Makes me think that it will work pretty nicely with percussion, with different
Mm-hmm.
types of percussion, like you might say cymbals, arch and cymbals, like bows and cymbals, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That type of sound, that screechiness and stuff like that.
Well, then there's tons of pieces that also just use the I mean, they use the piano as a resonator too. Um, there
Yes.
is, yeah, I know there's like the first piece that comes to my mind. I think it's the trumpet sonata, the Barrio one that does that. I've
I
there's a lot of other
was
pieces out
thinking
there.
of the same one, but I'm not sure. But yeah, yeah, I think I
Yeah,
see what you mean. Huh.
yeah.
Anyway, the inside of the piano is another animal. It's not. I don't know. This conversation took an unexpected turn. Let's say.
But I mean, I will say when I taught at this really cool summer camp, Walden, in New Hampshire, for a summer,
Oh, I heard.
and it's all contemporary music, and it's a pretty experimental program. But not all the it's and the students are very wide backgrounds, and at the very beginning, their like first like composition project is a group composition project where
A
they
group
have to
composition.
write a piece. They write it in groups, and so most of them it has and they have to do it really fast. So most of them have like somewhat graphic scores or text scores or verbal score, or have just a verbal understanding of what they're gonna play, and they write pieces for inside the piano, usually for like four people inside the piano at the same time. Um, and they get so I mean the students come up with really really creative things, but I think the reasoning behind um, it was inviting because I think it's easy to make cool sounds in the inside of the piano for them just to experiment with like more unusual contemporary sounds, just kind of open up their ears and their palette and their excitement to wider scope maybe than they had.
Hmm. Well, that's pretty cool. But how do you? I know that you can turn a piano like in your piece with Melanie Aceto into a different animal, and that seems
Mm-hmm.
pretty organic. But uh, I still will have my reservations on.
Sort of organic.
Uh,
Organic, but it was it's kind of funny that it seems organic, yet it was like just like the basic concept. I think took me over a year of work just to be able to make sound, not even good
well,
sound, but just
but it works in its own sound world.
yeah.
What I mean by organic is that when I visualize or yeah, listen to extended techniques on the piano, they seem like pretty superficial and not part of the piece as a whole unless you are always using them. And if you are always using them, they seem pretty limited. Like you cannot do much with them. That's what I that's how I see it, and that's probably why I don't consider to use them, and I would rather stay on the more conventional pitchy manners and then
I mean, you're talking about especially most of these extended piano sounds are for the grand piano. So you're
yes,
talking about a large instrument. So I mean, there's just a lot of it's just physically awkward and slow, and I mean, just getting a lot of these
there you
to
go. Yeah,
produce.
you
There's you get while you get amazing palette of sounds, there's a lot of limitations that come with those sounds.
yeah, I think you've worked more with those and you've thought more about those. And in the end, well, you could make another instrument out of the keyboard with the ah, I'm calling it the aceto piece. I
Oh,
forgot the name.
yeah,
What's the title? What's the title?
liaison,
Liaison, liaison.
liaison.
My bad. We,
Yeah,
I had it on the tip
and
of my.
that was more like just an aesthetic. I think. I mean, that piece really just it wasn't that I was necessarily interested in the inside of the piano stuff. It was more that I was really interested in her movement and her dancing, and she was like just improvising for me, and we were having prompts, and she was doing a lot of really interesting improvisations based
But the
on those
sound word
prompts.
that came out of
And
it was
she
another.
mentioned that she wanted to play the piano, and I wanted her to do what she was doing, but play the piano with it. And I really didn't know what kind of sound world was possible or to expect or have any goals. It was more like just discovering and seeing if I could find something that was interesting and useful for that particular piece anyway.
Yeah. Yep. But
I mean, I think that's a good way to approach contemporary music. To be honest, to just be very, I guess, playful with it and not forcing it too hard and seeing what there is for you to discover rather than I don't know. So sometimes if you're that directed, it can start to sound a little bit gimmicky, or like you're just like, oh, trying to use all these sounds. I don't know.
yeah.
It's easier to find original sounds if you don't exactly know what you're looking for.
Or only if you try to be yourself. I don't like that term that much, but in the end, if you're doing your own thing, if you are even writing for the keys on the keyboard, and you're not trying to imitate anybody, you're just trying to find a piece that is within your head, trying
Not
to get
being derivative, yeah.
you can get out some new sounds even out of an instrument that has been you may argue that's been overdone, right? That there's so much repertoire for the piano. But yeah, I'm just thinking here because the next step was to incorporate extended techniques into my music, and it wouldn't have at the piano. I don't know. It doesn't seem that natural because at the same time you cannot incorporate that into the discourse effectively, at least for me, at least for my language, because of the many things we've mentioned. It's not like a
Yeah.
guitar, even a classical guitar that doesn't have that many extended techniques. You can find ways to incorporate different sounds that are not standard, and well, for string instruments like the violin definitely has been really they've been extensively
Yeah, I
explored.
have a whole book just on extended technique on the violin, and it's like that thick.
Yeah, and even on other instruments like wind instruments, woodwind instruments. um, for the percussion there's a world just by playing it differently, going out there and playing with the instrument itself. Uh, for for brass, it's kind of tricky, but at the same time, some stuff can always be done. You are the expert on that one too, Megan. Like for French
Uh, I
stuff, like
think brass has um you. I think usually it doesn't have a large repertoire of really convincing sounds in the extended technique range. There was a piece. Let me see
there's
if I
stuff
can
like
think of what they're called.
blowing, like making blowing
Yeah,
sound.
there is a piece that I just heard like a couple weeks ago. A horn solo piece by Dai Fujikura, who used as a bass trombone, like harmon mute in the horn, and it's one of the. I mean, it's a really incredible piece. Like, and I don't think that about many, really any other probably. Well, no, that's not true. But I don't think that about many pieces for the horn in general. And that's just like a very different. It's just a very really different sound and a really wide possibilities of sound world there. Um, that I'm interested. It's a solo piece. He has a horn concerto too. I'm interested if he does similar things. I don't know, but yeah, this was and it was a very quiet piece, which is not typically what you think of brass to either.
No,
But yeah, I mean, usually like
never.
extended technique for brass is like flutter tongue, which is fine, but it's overdone. I guess stopped horn, which is doesn't really feel that extended. Like buzzing sounds, but they're not very rich sound. They're not very rich sounds or like air sounds. They're not. This doesn't have I guess, a particular rich sound
But still,
palette.
you get this palette and you can create something. I think that I think that you got a pretty rich if you can get creative with them. Even it's I think that it's kind of hard, but they are already at least use one or two in your discourse. You can use one or two in your discourse and have a pretty decent piece without having to call them extended techniques or having to call them Lahenmanian. They are the thing with calling them extended techniques is like okay, they are very special, but at this point they've been around for 50, 70 years already. It's kind of like uh,
Yeah,
I think that they shouldn't be considered like Lahenmanian like some composers do. Like we're trying to emulate Lahenman or something by using extended techniques. We're just trying to use what's in the vocabulary to
we're just
ex-
kept. Yeah,
to express a piece to be expressive in a way, and that's a
for
conversation
sure. Yeah,
of itself. Just wanted to
for
get
sure.
that
Yeah,
out there about
yeah.
extended techniques. And
But I do think piano is one that often is harder. I don't know. I think for at least for me anyway, I think string instruments and percussion instruments are the
they
most
are the one that
uh,
let themselves.
they're most inviting to explore extended techniques, I guess.
And if you can, and it depends with woodwinds, probably the multiphonics and the singing and playing and
Yeah,
the
but a lot of that
air
stuff
sound.
isn't reliable. Like it's not.
No, it's
A lot
not
of the techniques aren't reliable between players, and it
reliable.
becomes hard.
That's
Where
the
most of the string
problem.
techniques are pretty reliable.
Yes, definitely. You've hit the mark there.
So
Like
yeah,
you have to be very open to have very different results with woodwinds, especially with
or
multiphonic,
just
for example,
write for one player and
and fingering
be okay with that. Yeah,
that too. Uh,
yeah,
let the or be in charge of a recording that the recording is the piece or the main idea for the piece, stuff like that. Huh?
yeah. I mean, we've talked about working collaboratively, and often I think we all have pieces that maybe have gotten a good performance, but not performant, or maybe several, but only by one particular player. Um, and I think at this point that when I was younger, I would never have written a piece for that situation, but I've seen it happen many times, and I mean, at this point, would be totally okay with like writing for one player if they were going to play my piece and dedicate the time to learning it. A piece that maybe just wouldn't be possible to be played by somebody else. Like I think that could be fun actually.
Yeah,
Um,
that's how it comes to life, and it will be probably closer to your original idea, uh, of how
Yeah.
you perceive it. Shanting, how about you? What do you think of extended techniques? You've been
I
pretty
think
quiet.
I think again I'm always very concerned about whether it is convenient to perform those techniques. Even
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, I have experimented with some of them. I won't say I'm expert regarding extended techniques. I find it pretty easy for the string player if you just want to do some like the change of bowing position or whatever the highest pitches or whatever glissando. They are pretty okay, but of course they are also very concerned about whether we are going to destroy their very expensive instruments, especially when you talk about like a scordatura or like a
Mhm.
heavy elbowing pressure. I mean, according to my experience, they are the most resistant to scordatura because they think that's when we alter the tension, the string tension. I don't know how to describe it. When they need to alter all these things, they are afraid of like damaging
Yeah,
the structure of
the
the
action
instrument.
is different when you don't prepare a string instrument, so it's tuned different. Then the pressure you have to use to press the string also changes. So there's that.
and and also I used that for my dissertation and for one chamber piece, and the end result, I mean, if you just want to judge from the recording, of course it's okay, but the practical the practical side of it is I have to prepare a score that is the written pitch, the part, I mean the part must be like specially prepared. And also for after changing the tuning, um, the instrument may not be able to hold the pitch very well. So at the end of the piece, um, when I asked for natural harmonics, uh, the harmonics didn't sound accurately because the instrument couldn't hold the string after I have lowered the tension too much.
Yeah,
Um,
it's that you have there's a process. You have to set it up to a specific tuning. It happens with guitar, for example. The tension of the strings is set up in a specific way. If you just tune it different on the fly, then you will have to mess around with other parts of the instrument so that it compensates. And there's relief or tension that has to be dealt with, let's say. Yeah, the scordatura on the fly it is definitely a problem that it yeah, I haven't heard that much about it, but you made me think about it now.
but
Can
when
become
you talk about extended technique for woodwind or for let's say brass, I think for the brass it's hard. First, I don't have enough opportunities to write for brass, and and it seems to me that it's the extended techniques for brass don't really like change the timbre to an extent that I want to apply them. And I think woodwind for the woodwind maybe the multiphonics are so-called possible, but it is really hit and miss. I
You have different ones for the woodwinds. You also have the a jet whistle. You have the slap tongue. There's plenty of one that have been developed. I think, although not to the standard of wind of sorry of string instruments for sure. The string instrument will be the most reliable.
yep, definitely.
But then again, the question will be to what extent are these extended techniques extended? Can we use them in the vocabulary of a piece? Or, like Megan says, do you have to use them with a specific performer and work
Mhm.
with that performer? Is it gonna be answered soon?
We
Because
need.
they've been around for a while now, and composers kind of like ask for them all of the time, uh, and at least half of the time they don't know of the implications that go into them and the inaccuracy that can happen. But at the same time, you have all of these performers writing these theatrices about them, like books and stuff like that. So I think that is a subject that should be spoken about more in the future, because extended techniques only give us more more expressive options in the end if you can incorporate them correctly into the musical discourse, uh, into your time-based art form. Let's say that's just what I wanted to say. But I've been thinking about what this has made me think about, like, because on one end we have the piano piece here that I've talked about the extended techniques and how I see them, and then we started talking about the string quartet, and in a string quartet will be a context where you have the most reliable extended techniques that can be used over and over. Just trying to
Mhm.
get this out there. But yeah, I think that this will be an ongoing conversation on new music.
I mean, that's so why the I think the pieces that are the most innovative for a particular instrument um, are usually either written by composers for an instrument they play, or written for a player that they have a high collaboration with.
Those are how the burial sequenzas were written, right? Pretty much.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
But also they kind of became standards. Every player of the instrument has to play the sequenza for their instrument, I believe, or no?
Yeah. I mean, I think he was maybe following the Hindemith model, where you write for a solo piece for every instrument. Or I guess the Zane Merritt model is too.
Huh. That's pretty. We
I don't
have
know.
to.
Maybe they're onto something.
Yeah, these are compositional problems that ha- have begun like at the half of the last century, but we're still talking about them today, and um, it's like a lot of people seem to disregard them now as they were part of some period of some experimental period, but I don't think that that is the case. I think that once the box is open, we can deal with those materials. We have to deal with those materials. Like, we cannot just ignore that they exist, is what I will
Sure.
say.
I mean, any sound can be a cliche. whether it's an extended technique or not. I mean, I think it's important to realize the cultural and historical significance behind the sounds we choose. Um, yeah, and carefully selecting them.
But also how you
But
use
I
cliches
don't.
matter, because if you use cliches consciously, then you are kind of creating a comedic effect in a way. But if you
For
are using
sure, for sure.
consciously, then you are falling into the cliches.
Yeah, for sure.
And
But I think it's yeah. I don't think that's. I think it's just to be aware of them.
yeah, and there's like for people that are not familiarized with contemporary music or so-called new music, etc., there's plenty of cliches in this idiom that one can fall into, even if it's new for the majority of the audience. Like, yeah, there's been
Mhm.
something that been formalized pretty fast, that have uh, crystallized pretty fast. Like,
For sure.
for example, long sounds on the orchestra, long spectral sounds on the orchestra. I can pretty much visualize that, how a piece like that is going to go forward and stuff like that. Anyway, I think it's been a pretty fruitful conversation out of my
Yeah.
Opus One, and we've been here for a while. Any other thing you guys want to add?
No, I think I
I
enjoyed
think I'm
listening to
good.
it.
I think we're good. Right. So
Yeah.
Yep.
that would be all for today. Be safe. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.